Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's Demystifying Post Production series. I'm here with my very good friend, Dustin Valkema. I hope I pronounced it well. And
I'm here.
number, nice to be with you, my friend. And throughout the month, we're going to be joined by Lionel Vicidomini as well to do this special May month on compositing 3D elements in live footage and all things tangential, but with a twist. We're going to talk about it in a moment. So, first of all, I would like a confirmation from everyone in the audience that we are audible and they can see us and hear us. So I'm going to wait for my 5-second delay. Anyone saying that we are audible? So we can start this. Let's see. No replies. Is everyone paying attention? Ah,
Awesome.
sounds good. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's the delay. It's the delay. I'm very impatient person. So during the month of May, for 5 weeks, and if anyone says that a month has 4 weeks, well, that's not true, and the proof is in our show. And a few things about the show is that when I'm looking there, I'm looking at the camera. When I'm looking there, I'm looking at my screen. When I'm looking there, I'm looking at the real time feedback and my friend Dustin. When I'm looking there, I'm looking at the comments and the feedback from YouTube. I have too many monitors, sensory overload, but I think I can handle it with enough coffee. So, first of all, let me share my screen. And there we go. Here's my screen, and I'm going to make it full screen so you can see exactly what happens. So this is the Maxon events page, and this is where you need to go to look for any of the shows we're doing live or recorded, the ones that are planned and so forth. You can search by regions, by dates, by all sorts of stuff. And as you can see, we have the Demystifying, we have the fantastic series on color with our friend Max, which is called Max on Color. What a pun. Then we have the ZBrush special on May the 4th. You know, May the 4th be with you. VFX and chill every Friday to chill and learn, have a few laughs while being educated at the same time. And the Master Trainer series that we have every week. And the design animation tour is starting with the first stop in Denver. So you can check schedules and stuff like that to see when it's close to one of the cities you can attend to, and all sorts of other events that are taking place. The best ones are the ones that me and my friends Dustin and Lionel, and of course, thank you to Carl Johnstone that's in the background and producing these series for us. Because without him, we would be messing things up in my usual tradition. So let me go down my cheat sheet. So the next thing I'd like to tell you about is the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, where it has fantastic content, the content you follow or should follow, and you should take time out of your real lives to watch every single second of this content. You'll become better humans if you do so. Then the next thing is certification. If you want to become a certified pro user or a certified trainer, just go to this page, maxon.net slash, well, English/certification, or go to learn and go to the certification over here, and you'll find what you need to find. And any questions we'll respond to. We talk about this all the time. The design animation tour, these are the details of the design animation tour over here. It's a collaboration between Maxon and mograph.com. And I participated in the equivalent a few years ago, and it's fantastic. Now, last but not least, what do we have here? Merch store. Free t-shirts. Go and choose one of your free t-shirts. Go to this address here. If we can post it somewhere so everyone can see it. I can actually copy it from here and paste it to everyone. There you go. And the code for this is all caps compositing 3D with no spaces. So we may see a banner any minute coming up with that. It's all caps compositing 3D without any spaces. You only pay for shipping and handling. We do handle these very gently. right? We don't hurt any of our merch. And there's a great array of stuff you can buy. I'm wearing this, not because it's, seasonally appropriate. It's got something in snow, but it's appropriate because it's still cold here, although it's May the 1st. Have a good month, everyone. So go there to get your free t-shirt. So I think it's time to do the introduction. So I'm going to close my screen, and there you go. So he's on this side. No, he's on this side. Oh my God, it's so confusing, isn't it? So Dustin Valkema, and I'm going to read the bio to make it official.
Oh, goodness.
Dustin Valkema is a Maxon certified master trainer. That is true, by the way. He's a 3D generalist and composite photographer with over 15 years of industry experience. He's now focused on education and mentorship through his company CG Hacks, which provides VFX overlays, 3D textures, and material libraries and other resources to bridge the gap between 2D and 3D workflows. I should be a narrator, right? Dustin's
I
passion.
like it. If I ever write a book, I know who's narrating it. I thought it was going to be Morgan Freeman. It's Noseman.
Or Dustin's passion for helping others stems from his own experiences with failure and learning from them. He believes that with a bit of creative tenacity and willingness to learn, anything is possible in the world of digital art. And actually, that last phrase cannot be truer. All right, you have to be tenacious, and you have to watch our content. That's what I was getting to. Okay, so catch his socials. I'm gonna paste a bunch of his socials right in there. I'm going to paste it from here. So I'm going through various windows and stuff like that. There you go. I hope this comes up nicely formatted, but these are all the socials. You'll find which ones are which. And his YouTube channel, which is YouTube /@CG Hacks. By the way, the name Valkema, Valk in Dutch means falcon. So the falcon of knowledge. Did I get that right? Yep.
It's true. Yeah, I'll be the we'll say that we'll be the Black Falcon for the stream. How about that?
Yeah, the bird of prey of knowledge.
Superhero.
That's
Yeah.
okay. So I think it's time to start with the show. So if anyone is watching, now is the time to start. So I'm going to go and add my screen over here. I'm taking away my beautiful face, and I'm going to bring up some software. So what are we going to talk about today? And I'm going on the other side to look at my cheats over here. Okay. So if you expected a tutorial about, oh, how we're going to track this shot here, or how we're going to track this shot here, this is not what we're going to do today. What we are going to do is use your existing talent and experience as humans, using your eyes and your intuition to assess certain types of scenes without using any special tools, just by using the feedback you get from an image or a video. And the part I'm going to do is how to estimate the camera and the position, orientation, the type of lens approximation, and stuff like that. And then my friend Dustin is going to show you how to do the same thing, but when it comes to lighting, there are some tricks you can do. And I'm going to start with some very basic things. I'm going to start with the horizon. And I'm going to go to an empty Cinema 4D screen over here. And we know that if we navigate, we get this line here, this dotted line. And this is the horizon. And what you will realize is that when the horizon aligns with the center of your camera, and let's assume that the floor, the ground of the earth or wherever you are, is not elevated, the horizon and the floor align. That means that your camera actually, what your camera is doing here is sitting flush on the ground, right? I can't even get that to do that. But if I go here and create a camera, you will see that the camera elevation is very small. It's 3 centimeters, right? That's as big as it will be when with this little deviation. So the horizon actually allows us to tell if a camera is pointing downwards, when the horizon is higher than the center of your camera. And when the camera is pointing upwards, and if you're above the ground level and your horizon is below the center of your camera, right? This is the center. And I can always go, if you want to visualize these things, you can go to the composition of your camera over here, and you can add a grid or a crosshair. In the crosshair, the funny thing is that you can actually extend the lines to do this. So now we know that this is the center of the camera. Now, I want to say something that's very important when it comes to footage. If you're using this rule to eyeball if a camera is looking upwards or if a camera is looking downwards, you can see it's looking upwards now. And again, the telltale is that the horizon is below the center of your frame. There is a catch in this. And let's go to some footage here and take a look at something that will make that a bit more prominent. There you go. So this is just a video, just a simple video, and I think I can scale this down somewhat. I don't know how to use this program. Anyway, when this is framed, and I see I didn't plan for this. Viewer, full screen size. Okay, I'll go half size here, so I can get the whole. And the software, what happened? It doesn't. Oh my God, these are the things. I hate it when this happens. I don't know how to make this centered. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Pan, zoom, audio, tools, fit. Does anyone see fit? I hate this. I just had a video player. That's all I wanted, a simple video player. So anyway, just believe me that the horizon is in the middle of my frame. This is going to drive me crazy now. So you'll give me a second to figure this out. If anyone has something to say, pan, zoom in, zoom out.
On this episode of Thanassis Learns How to Use a Computer.
Control minus. It's not becoming smaller. Okay. So what I'm going to do is close this, because this might be that my application just, and I'm going to go back here, double click on this. And there we go. So I'm going to go to a certain frame here, right here at the end. Now I've got things. You can see the horizon. The furthest part that indicates either a surface of a water body or the sea or something like that. So forget about my blunder earlier. Now imagine, and here's what I wanted to get at. Imagine if this was a photo, someone shot it with a camera, and then someone cropped it over here. Someone crops this image, all right, over here, and suddenly the horizon is below the center of your image, because if you crop your image here, then the center of your image is here. But the camera is still facing forwards because the horizon is at the center of your image. So this is the first rule of tracking or estimating a shot. You need to make sure that the image has not been cropped, because different types of crops will produce different results. Now, we will touch upon this subject again in the future, in one of the future episodes. When you are shooting for the purpose of putting 3D in your footage, either make sure you do it properly, or the person that did it gives you the full information of what was done to the image after the fact. The best thing is to receive the footage directly as it was shot, and some information about the lens and so forth. Anyway, this is the horizon thing that you always need to remember. If the horizon appears above the center of your camera view, then the camera is pointing downwards. If the horizon is under, that means the camera is pointing upwards. So what I'm going to do to continue the eyeballing thing is I'm going to use a frame from this image and show you a few other tricks you can do to estimate. And let's go and just load. I'm going to show you this scene later on. So I'm going to go here and use the old school Cinema 4D standard render. I'm just going to load a frame in my color channel. So I'm going to go over on my other screen, just grabbing my footage. I'm going to go in my text folder. I'm going to bring it over, and this is the campus. So I'm just dragging this over from a folder in here. I'm going to say, yes, I don't really care. Now, if you're doing anything with the image as a background, make sure you go to the viewport and you set this to no scaling. So it doesn't scale the image. It just uses the pixels as they are. And the next thing, you can get a background object. That's the easiest way, and drag it on here. So now we have our image, but you can see our ground plane is a bit misplaced. So in order to have a better view of our ground plane, we're going to use these to estimate the actual lens to the best of our ability. I'm going to go to my project settings here, and I'm going to go to the scheme colors. And I'm going to look in the viewport editor for something called, let's go work plane. So major work plane. I'm going to put this here and change the color to something quite bright. You can see these lines, and you can go to the other work plane if you wish and make it, let's say, blue here. So now we have these colors that really stand out. And this is on a system level. So if you open a new scene, it will have these colors. So make sure you can reset them if you want. Just go here and say reset, and it's going to reset everything. So now we have a better indication of our work plane. So what can we do to calculate this? So first of all, let's go and create a camera object, right? Because I'm going to use some coordinates. Let's activate it. And anything we do now, this camera is going to be affected. So first of all, let's assume that for the purpose of this particular scene, I want to be centered on this road here, right in the center of my screen. So I'm going to make sure that at least my camera's X is right in the center. I'm going to zero these out to begin with. And you can start by finding the elevation of the camera. So obviously the camera is not on the ground, and obviously it's facing forward. So there's going to be no rotation over here. If we do want to do that, if we want to fine tune it, we can do that. But the most important thing is, how high is our camera from the ground if we want our global ground to be over here? And the telltale sign to find out is, let's look at this building over here, right? Look at this building and look at these lines, these parallel lines. You need to find that point where these continuous lines that are going towards the vanishing point in infinity are level with your camera. What does that mean? Well, look at these over here. These do not go either upwards. So these lines over here, I may take a little spline here and just draw. Click here and click here. And I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to my colors, and I'm going to set this to automatic and set this to a nice bright blue color. And you can see that this is fairly straight, and it goes through without any inclination. It doesn't go downwards, it doesn't go upwards. Whereas if you go to these here, you will see that this goes downwards. And if you go over here, this goes upwards. Well, one of the general rules when you're doing any kind of, I can get rid of this, any kind of eyeballing, is that if your lines are going upwards towards the vanishing point, you are above that level, that whatever that line indicates, whether it's a floor, whether it's a set of doors or windows. And if it's going downwards, that means you're under that. So wherever you find that level of things that are in the same level, you can be assured that your camera is approximately at that height. Now, what is that height? Well, you go and you Google how high is a story in the United States. And I think it's about, each story is around 14 feet. Dustin, if you have another number to give me, but I think it's about 14 feet. And the ground floor is slightly taller. So let's assume that this is overall 14 plus 10, 24 feet up. So you can say, let's put the camera at 24 FT feet. And now the camera is 24 feet high. It's 7.5 meters above the ground. So we know the camera is at that height. And if we go to one of our You can see that's a ground plane, and there's our camera. We have solved the first indication. Now, the second is, which way is the camera pointing in terms of up and down? So now that we have the camera elevation, we can go and we can start playing with the rotations here. So 5, you can see the horizon is here. It can, I think, come up a bit more. Oh, down. There you go. So I've just put my horizon exactly where I think the end of the world is, right there. That's a mountain. That's obviously not the level of the ground or the sea. So the camera is facing about 4.6 degrees in that direction. I can always change the um, the heading. And the good thing with the heading is that I can follow these lines to see which way it is heading. Now, it may appear because this work plane is extending on the image, you may think, oh, but it's over. No, that's just because it's an overlay. As far as the positioning of the camera is facing downwards, as the horizon indicates, and is at the proper elevation as far as the building indicates. Now, the last thing you would do is to see what the focal length, what camera this was shot on. And what happens usually is that the wider the lens, the more extreme will be your perspective. And the opposite happens when your lens becomes a zoom lens. So what you need to do is find features in your scene that are seemingly parallel, like these, and try to estimate to make it so that the parallelism, if I may call it so, is correct. So let's do an extreme thing. What I'm going to do is deactivate this camera here, and I'm going to go, you can go to your, if you have your default camera, you can go to the mode camera over here, and you can change the lens without having an actual physical camera over here. So what you could do in this particular case, oops, right, is start playing with this number until those parallel lines align to a good extent to two of your plane lines. Let's see what the situation is over here. So let's go. These seem to be a bit too pinchy. And I'm just navigating because there you go. Now you can see that this line, the actual work plane and this line have a very good fit. It appears that all the same parallel lines are running nicely and parallel to our ground plane line. So I would assume the focal length to be around 33.3, right? It's not correct, but for the purpose of what we are seeing here, that seems to work. So just copy this from here, go to your other camera, and let's paste it. I wasn't very far off, right? 33.3. So pretty much now, if the camera was tilted in any side here, it doesn't appear to be tilted because maybe the camera was tilted. All you have to do is correct for that particular rotation using this. But just by looking at the elements that happen to be on the same level will give you the elevation. Any parallel lines will allow you to uh, to approximate the focal length of your camera, and then the horizon if it's pointing upwards or downwards, and so forth. Now, with this in mind, this is an ideal situation, and we do have parallel lines and so forth. What happens if we don't have that luxury? So here I have a circular court, and I'm going to turn off this camera and turn off this circle over here. So I've done the same thing. I've loaded the image in the background, and I have this. I have this over here. Now, in this particular case, we don't have anything in a known height to compare where we are. So we can see from the pillars that we are quite where the middle of the pillar, and actually not even where the middle is. we are slightly lower than the centerpiece of the pillar. So if you do find this in Wikipedia and ask, and if you do find how tall these are, you can find out what the actual height of your camera is. But in this particular case, I'm just going to eyeball it, because the elevation of the camera only becomes important when you're doing things in proper scale. If you're not doing things in proper scale, this could be a miniature stadium. And what a 20-foot pillar will do if your camera is 10 feet up to the ground, if this is a 3-inch pillar, because this is a plastic model, then your camera is going to be the equivalent of, let's say, 2/5 of 3 inches or something like that. So only when real life scale is important, the actual height is important. But sometimes, just like I showed you in this example, it's easier to work in real life examples because you can tell approximately how tall this is. 14, 15 feet, you're good within that sort of range. So let's go back to that. Where was I? I was here. Now, the problem that this image, this actual, it was the Romans' fault, is that they didn't do many things parallel. So look at this green line running here. So these little paths here are not parallel, either because there's an inclination towards the center for water to go out or something like that, or any uh, animal blood or something like that. But under no circumstances can we extract good parallel information using these lines here. So to estimate the focal length, we don't have any features other than the vertical straight features. Everything else is round. But there is a nice little trick here. There is a way circles behave depending on perspective, which many people are not aware of. So I'm going to open a new scene here. And this is starting to give me a high reset. All colors. There we go. Back to normal. I feel much better now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a circle and lay it on the floor. And I'm going to add a camera, or actually I can use my own document camera here. So go here, go to camera. And what I'd like you to pay attention to is, we know that perspective changes by changing the focal length. So I'm going to go to something extreme here, and I'm going to zoom in here. And what you will observe, I'm going to make this a few more segments, make it nice and round, that although everything else is extremely distorted, a circle under any perspective conditions, under any lens that doesn't do distortions, is always an ellipse. It doesn't become pointier at the back. It doesn't become wider at the front. It's always an ellipse, always. And if I go to my model geometry, geometry only won't show the geometry. So let me go back to my default. Oh, really? Is this what's going to happen today? Oh, I need to turn that off. All right, sorry, user error. And so how are we supposed to estimate the perspective when we have circular features? Well, one thing you may have observed right here is the circle is at the center of the world, 0, 0, 0. But the center of the world seems quite far back, doesn't it? Whereas if I go to my camera again and set this to a more normal lens, let's say a 200 lens, zoom lens, and bring everything in, now you see that although we have an ellipse again, the center is in the center. So the difference between when you have a single circle and you're viewing it under different perspectives, different lenses, although the circle itself, the perimeter of the circle, does not change, what changes is the position of the center. And the best way to view this is using a ring, and let's go to the inner radius, put it here. So this is now I'm going to add the camera here because it's easier to change the parameters. So this is a 200 millimeter lens, right? Or 300 millimeter lens. And the more your lens is zoomed in up to the point where it becomes an orthographic without, if you have an infinite focal length, it becomes an orthographic projection, that's when the center of the ellipse is right there in the middle of the height and the width. The wider the lens becomes, you will start seeing that center moving towards the back. It's not in the middle anymore. And I can prove this by going to my camera, composition, adding the crosshair, extending it. And you will see that this is the center of the circle. Now this has moved up. And the more I make this a wider lens, the more you're going to see the extreme effect of that. So it's still an ellipse. Now this is the midpoint, and that's where the circle is. So you can eyeball that difference and adjust your camera to oh, it's always the first one, isn't it? Oh, first one, no, it's the second one. It's always the second. So let's try that. So I've got this circle here, and let's assume that my camera is of some weird thing over here. All you have to do is make sure that you have the second circle. This is a second circle, which you assume the Romans did correctly. And you can place it here. And now we can play around with the camera and do this over here. And you will see that when I bring this, I can tilt it so it fits in there. You will see that, well, in this particular case, maybe it needs to be moved ever so slightly front or back. Nonetheless, I think I had the right number. So this is your lens. If it wasn't correct, you would see that that circle will be slightly offset towards the front or the back. The differences are minuscule, but you can see now it's a bit further to the top. And by adjusting this so that the two circles lie where they should lie, you will find approximately what your focal length needs to be. So that's another way to estimate the focal length. Now, let me check on time as well, because I want to touch on another segment where some of this stuff actually doesn't make a difference, regardless of what you do. So I'm going to bring up another one of these great videos here. We're going to go through these one by one. So let's take a look at this footage here. I'm going to bring up the video player. So this is another piece of random footage. And let's talk about this. Now, let's find certain features which are obvious. What can have a known height? Well, a chair can have a known height. Chairs are usually, unless it's a toy chair or a child's chair, they have a range of heights, a very small difference. So the fact that we can see the underside of the chair means that the camera, the elevation of the camera, is below the top of the seat. So if we want to use this frame and add some CG elements, we can start by estimating how high a chair is, and maybe then lowering it a bit because we see underneath. Then we can use some parallels to define, well, the furniture is not a very good estimate of that because these are just furniture where they've opened the doors, they're broken. The frame of a house, unless the house is falling, then that's a good indication of your y-axis to tilt your camera. The other thing you can do is you can estimate if the camera's looking upwards or downwards. And the horizon, again, will be exactly where the camera is facing. I would say the horizon will be somewhere in this range here. And again, these are just things you can do to eyeball. Don't use this part of the door because it seems a bit crooked. But nonetheless, those are enough if you want to use this for a still. You have your y-axis, you have your x-axis, which is around there, and you have your camera elevation. And then where exactly the camera is may not make such a difference. Again, let's move forward with some other of the footage. I'm going to open a few others. There we go. We saw this. Berlin transportation, right? This is another interesting one over here. So what can we extract from this movie? Let's see here. Where can the camera be? Well, you can see that where the people sit on this little fountain, you can barely see the backside. It's close to flush. You can see a bit of it. So the camera is not much higher than what a ledge can be. And you can see this human is sitting, this person, this human, because I'm not, I refer to him as a human, sitting pretty comfortably. So this would be the height of a chair. And that's how you can estimate the height of your camera. And you have some nice parallel lines here to find out what camera you're using. Let's go to another quick one because I'm going to surrender this. Here's another problematic piece of footage. So what we have here is a series of ramps. This is going downwards, this is going downwards, and this is going downwards. So it will be very difficult for us to estimate the floors and all that if we're using something that is not flush with the ground. But we do have this here, this floor of the building, which we can barely see underneath. You may be able to see a bit of this. This means that our elevation should be a bit lower than this over here. And this is the parallel we can use. Sometimes because certain photos are not very obvious what's going on, people may think that this line and this line are parallel, where in fact they're not, because this is going downwards. The parallel lines is this, and these are the ones that are going to help you find your focal length. So make sure you select the proper lines when you have situations like these. This is one that Dustin is going to show you as well, where we can make an estimation if the camera is actually, besides spinning around, if it's actually moving upwards or downwards, the camera elevation. And we, in these situations, we find, because we have a lot of humans, and generally, within a certain range, humans have a certain range of heights. And if you can draw a line and find out which of the features of a human body lie on the same level, in this particular case, I would assume it will be the eye line somewhere here. And you can go around and see that, yes, people's heads happen to be in the middle of this lady's head here. This person is a bit taller, which sort of makes sense as well. So you can assume that the camera was maybe around 5.5 feet or 1 meter 60, 65, 70. You can approximate that. And you can tell if the camera is going upwards, if the horizon drops down, and all that nice stuff. But these are the little cues you can get to estimate what your camera is doing, where it was, and where it was facing. So the last one, two last ones. So this is one that I find interesting here. So here the camera obviously is very low, but how low is it? Because this is the ground, we're very close to the ground. Well, you find a scene where two features like shoes. So obviously we're not on the ground, because the feet that are on the ground, the shoes that are on the ground, are not on the same level. This one is here, this one is higher up, and this one is higher up. So we're obviously elevated, we're not embedded in the concrete. So you find that little tip of the shoe, maybe the middle point of the foot, that happens to the same level, or the ankle. There we go. I think the ankles now are aligned. So just measure your ankle with a tape measure, and you know how high the camera was. And the last one would be this one over here. Now, funny enough, trees, how tall is a pine tree? Fine. No, because depending on the age, the tree changes. In a situation like this, it doesn't matter. And this is the biggest thing you can extract. You can pretty much track this. Maybe you can track this using a tracker. But if you have one frame and you want to put something that is CG into this scene, there's absolutely no reason you need to track it. You can fully eyeball this without doing any specific measurements. Make sure your grid pretty much aligns here visually, and then you can add your spaceships and all the other stuff you need to add. So in some cases, it may even be impossible to eyeball a scene, and you can just use it as if it's not even required to have any 3D elements. Just like compositing, you can just add something on top. So that, by process of elimination, if you can't eyeball or track something, just avoid doing that. Okay, let me see if are there any questions? Let me.
I don't think there are any questions. How would you compare this process versus After Effects camera tracking to Cinema 4D?
Each process has its own. Let me show our beautiful faces here. Okay, so each process has its own value. So if we go to that first image I showed with the campus and the camera elevated and all that, it does take less than 5 minutes to do a good estimation for a still frame in that particular case. So why track it to begin with? If you have such a clear indication of all your perspectives and your camera elevation, and just want to add some CG elements to that, and your image looks good, then there's no reason to do the tracking. Now, there could be cases if you have moving footage, if you have video and you want the camera to move, then yes, you will use a tracker. But the kind of tracker you're going to use sometimes is not as important. Let me give you a very small example of that scene over here. So if I'm adding 3D elements, I have a scene with this, and let me just put on my Redshift. Let me get my Redshift. Where's my Redshift render view? And start this. I think I've added some materials here and stuff like that. Okay, so in this particular case, the eyeballing is perfect, the light estimation is perfect, and it just sticks here, and the 3D objects are here. I'm great. Even if it's a moving video, if it's a proper video, and I use a camera tracker and all that. But what if I just want to put a banner on these windows? Do I need a 3D tracker? No. You can get away with a 2D planar tracker, like Kingpin, for example, which is part of our tool set. And you don't need to bother with too much of the details, because it will extract the information you need. Even if you want to put some a graffiti on this, you don't need anything more than a planar tracker. So tracking essentially is the epitome of cheating. Even the software itself, it just estimates to the best of its ability, and that's why a lot of tracks will fail. And this is something we're going to see in one of the next episodes, how surely a track will fail. But there's no rule. If the camera tracker in After Effects will provide you with the information you need to complete your project, do it there. If you require a bit more information, or you want to do it in Cinema 4D, and it offers you a few more things, because as far as I know, and correct me if I'm, oh well, you don't use After Effects, do you? But I don't think that the After Effects camera tracker allows you to do supervised tracking, manual tracking, right? So Cinema 4D allows you to do supervised tracking, and sometimes supervises the one where you use manual tracks to do that. And in that particular case, oh, by the way, what I forgot to tell everyone is you need to go and watch the Cineversity videos. I'm going to post the link to the Cineversity, the old Cineversity links, where you can see tutorials about tracking. And one thing I forgot to say is that Lionel Vicidomini, he has a Udemy course, and he has this coupon code, and you will get a hefty discount. And I need to read up on the discount, exactly how much it is. If someone can post the code, and I will post, there we go. I'm copying the link, and I'm going to paste it in the comments. It has the code as well. And you can go, and that is the code here at the end that says Maxon DPP May. And Lionel is offering a 75 discount, and it will be just $16 to watch his tracking tutorial on Udemy. And I will post, when Dustin takes over, the link to Cineversity. And why? Because you need to know what tool is best for you. So yeah, depending on the situation, you can use eyeballing, you can use Cinema 4D tracker, you can use After Effects tracker, or you can use a very expensive third-party tracker that does magic. But I believe that for most of the cases, you can get away, depending on what you're trying to do with After Effects or Cinema 4D. They offer different functionality depending on what you're trying to do. And again, 2D planar tracker, Kingpin, and all that can offer you great solutions. Let's see, are there any other questions before Dustin takes over? So will Maxon add AI? You're saying that we're not as good as AI? Okay. I don't know. Generally, I want to advise, don't ask questions of what Maxon is preparing to do or this, because even if we do know, we won't answer. No one tells us, but even if we do, for good reason, you know. But generally, we can't answer that. No one can answer that. You could always contact Maxon and offer suggestions for certain things. But yeah, we can't answer that. Okay, let's see. What else do we have? Do you analyze basically what I get my salary for? Great, Sandro. How would you compare this process versus After Effects? Again, that was the question I answered. Different tools, different processes for different things. Yeah, that's why if you ask questions, can you please preface it with a capitalized question or capitalized Q? Because I don't know what's a question or a compliment. Thank you very much. Preface compliments with C and questions with Q. Okay, I think, Dustin, are you ready? And yeah, if there are any questions about the process I've shown, please, Dustin, take over and I'll deal with questions and all that. And
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. You know, before we dive into this side, um, you know, there is, you know, a bit of a discussion, because I did see that was it Sandro that said that he does this, you know, he basically eyeballs for a living, and so do I, right? So for the most part, especially as a photographer that's integrating 3D stuff into stills and back and forth, there is so much eyeballing that goes on, because it many times it doesn't have to be more complicated than that, right? And a lot of times we get more married to the process of spending a lot of time on a project just because that's what the workflow is. And we oftentimes forget that, hey, like if we can shortcut this, ultimately it's going to maximize like our margins on a project. And so
one thing very important that you just touched upon, the sometimes the eyeballing process may inform you about a detail of your scene that your tracker, for whatever reason, cannot sort out, i.e., the focal length. So sometimes you can start with a very obvious frame of your footage, providing no one is actively zooming when they're shooting the footage. And you can estimate the focal length using your parallel lines, and then use that in your tracker to do the tracking, because the tracker itself, when you watch the tutorial, ideally you need to do a survey shot so that it extracts the focal length and then use that focal length to do the rest. Watch a tutorial. And anyway, I just want to add that it's not either or. Sometimes it helps to have a complementary relationship between the stuff you're doing, and you can extract a lot of things with your eyes and intuition that will help the technology do its job better. Back to you, Dustin.
yeah, it's yeah, definitely mastery before all. Definitely. And that's, you know, we talk about it quite a bit throughout the demystifying series as a whole. You know, that practice doesn't make you perfect. Practice gives you experience, which leads to wisdom, and it allows you to make better choices based on your needs for a project. And like Thanassis said, like there's a lot of times where if you learn to eyeball things and become confident with that, you can add that as a troubleshooting measure in your projects. And it's definitely great. So what we're doing today is a little bit different. We're not going to be in Redshift and doing a whole lot there. We're going to more be taking a look at shots that we're going to be using later on in the month, and kind of breaking down the lighting and kind of estimating where light's coming from. We'll talk about ways that we can go about adding more detail to, you know, specific scenes and what to look for as you're starting to maybe integrate CG elements into this stuff. So yeah, see there's your compliment. He spelled the whole compliment out, the whole thing. See, there's no question there. Kudos, Sandro.
Thank you. Thank you.
All
Yeah.
right, so we're in Photoshop today on my side. Taking a look at this first shot of the woman here in the square. So what we're seeing is quite a bit of light, right? But where is the light coming from? And this is something that I find some people struggle with. I struggled with it in the beginning of my compositing journey and lighting for composites, things of that nature, is really being able to identify, direct versus indirect light sources. And so this is one for me that I thought would be pretty cool to talk about. We know that the camera rotates in this shot because Thanassis just showed it, and I intentionally picked this one because it's a little bit more difficult. Once you start to get around the shot, you can see exactly where the light's coming from, and it shows it in all of its glory. So taking a look at the shot here, if we were to maybe not press my Windows key, zoom in here, and we'll just look at the subject. So if we were just looking at the subject, we would probably think that we have a light source coming from this direction, right? And that's because we're seeing the highlights on her face, some of the little specular lights and so on, and we can grab the visual cues here as to where the lightings come from. Just the person, not the background. If I were lighting and adding maybe a matte painting or something similar, like these are the cues that I would pull from. Now, when we back out of the shot, we have a huge light source right here, which is this castle looking building. And that light source is indirect, right? Because we're seeing the people. Let me maybe back out of that one there. We're seeing the people and their shadows are all heading this way, which means that our lighting is actually coming from this direction, bouncing off of our building here, and then back onto the subject. So when we're actually looking to place anything into this shot, the way that I would do this is starting off with an HDRI that has our light source coming from behind our subject, bouncing off of something here, and then we have other things to deal with in this shot, because we'll see, maybe just create a new layer here and we'll change the color. There we go. What we have here is a big shadow that's creating a lot of kind of overcast looking light, right? Like she's in shadow and she's a bit more cool than the background. So we know that there is something here that is creating shade. We can see that on the ground as well. We go from maybe not there. We'll just start creating a bunch of layers. Who cares? So we have quite a bit of cool lighting and warm lighting as this transitions. So we're going to want to have something that's going to flag off or break that light from our HDRI. So we need the ambient lighting. It's going to be a bit more cool from the sky, but we definitely need to have something there. In this case, I feel like we could use something like a cube and just throw that cube in front of whatever subject we have, and that's going to start making sense. Is there any questions that we have so far about like lighting and indirect lighting?
I can't see anything. I think people are absorbed by the information you're giving. So keep going, keep going.
Yeah, and so the next part that we have to look at when we're talking light estimation, we're going to get into shadows between hard and soft shadows and things like that here, and some of the other examples, is the intensity of the original light. So most of the time, you can cheat this very easily by rendering, a 32-bit image. You can composite that in post and have a whole lot of, play in your lights, because you can start to use normals and different things to pull lights. You can start to adjust the intensities of your light sources and so on. But in this case, most often what I'm doing is I'm looking at one of the white areas, which would probably be this guy here. It looks like somebody's shirt, looks like it's a white shirt. I'm going to be using that to base the intensity and even the color temperature of that light. And it's very easy to go in and set that as the white point in our lights. inside of Redshift. We can do it right through the camera, or we can also do that through the light source itself. All right, so second one, there we go. I did see something, how to deal with the case when CG objects go from lit surface to shaded area, and the best way to mask out CG shadows.
Yeah. elbow grease. Indeed.
Yeah, it's
we will touch upon this when we talk about 2.5D, that episode, because
right.
what you're bringing up, Sandro, which is one of the biggest challenges, is okay, we did our track, we're placing our objects, but then suddenly you have some objects in front of others. Then an object gets obscured and all that. And there's no way around that other than recreating at least part of the geometry or part of the image or both. You cannot avoid either method. Either you will need to mask something in post, or you need to mask something, essentially creating a 3D object or a 2.5D object in 3D, or both, but you can't avoid both of them. We're going to touch upon this, but your questions, besides the topics we do here, are going to inform us for more potential tutorials in the future. So yeah, keep these questions coming. I'm sorry I didn't have a simple answer. Just I don't know, snap your fingers and that'll happen. Yeah, because we'll be out of a job.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit different. So I've got quite a bit of experience with that specifically. Like, I mean, and like Thanassis said, you do have to recreate certain bits and pieces of a shot if you're wanting your subject to move in and out of shadow. Sometimes you can get away with gobos. We'll talk about that on the school campus, like kind of courtyard shot that Thanassis was showing once we get to that. And the same would actually be in this case, right? So finding out where the light source is coming from is actually very simple, because we can see that the light, or that the shadow, is here, right? So having a light source off camera right is, slightly behind her to get just that slight amount of angle to the shadow there. That's the way that it would generally go. But in the case that we have these pillars here that are being, part of these pillars, which is why we're getting that rounded top to the light source here, is because we have the overhang. And so if you're wanting a subject to maybe come out of this door, right, and then walk out into the sun, you're really going to have to build those bits of blockers in your scene. So the way that I like to do this, I just call them like shadow objects. It's nothing too crazy, but what I like to do is build cylinders and maybe have just a huge ellipse. Maybe could be even a cylinder itself that or it's not a cylinder. What are they called in cinema, Thanassis?
They're called, I'm actually opening the menu.
Are they cylinders? It might just be a cylinder. Who knows?
Oil tank or a capsule?
Oil tank or a capsule?
No,
that's not what I'm talking about. Anyway, it's a cylinder that has a piece in the middle. It's like a donut. We'll just call it a hard donut.
Okay. You're talking about the tube.
Yeah, there we go. A tube. See, brain fart, guys. It's Monday. Okay. So I would use some cylinders here for these pillars, and then I would have maybe a set of tubes and very loosely recreate, this structure here, this palette structure. Doesn't have to be super difficult, not a lot of detail to it, but enough that once your camera is tracked and everything is looking good, you can have somebody come, or maybe some kind of crazy ogre or something, bust through this door from the shadow into the light in this area. And this is pretty hard as shadows go, because it's sunlit, so we don't really need a whole lot of extra lighting into this. So the school campus, this one's actually going to be a little bit different. And when you're talking about subjects moving from one area to another and how to handle the transitions between, light and shadowed or maybe even stippled lighting, this is where things get a little bit more complicated, but it doesn't have to actually be thought of as complicated. You just have to break down what's in this shot exactly. All right. So we have hard sunlight and the shadows coming from camera right here. And the bigger area that we have of, question or, what we would do if we had a subject CG element moving through this shot has to do with these areas of stippled lighting. And so this is something that I would very easily, there's really two ways. The first way is to create like a big plane, and you would just use a gobo texture as an opacity mask for that plane. So I do think that, have we talked about gobos? We've talked about gobos before, I'm sure, here through our demystifying sessions. Maybe I can pull a link from that. We also have, if you're curious on how to use gobos, on the CG Hacks YouTube channel, we have a pretty cool video that talks about gobos and mixing gobo lights with other lighting in your scene and so on. I believe the video that I'm talking about was, I think it was with Ellie and Anna Carolina. We were talking about the Kraken project. If you guys remember Carl the Kraken, we were talking about all kinds of different methods of using gobos and noises and so on. Anyways, using a big plane with some kind of stippled lighting texture is going to allow you to break up these areas of dark shadow and then transition into more of the areas where the sunlight is and so on. And you can also place smaller planes in your scene to start taking care of these little trees. And it doesn't have to really be perfect. You just need to have that stippled lighting that is created by those trees. So using something like foliage, we have gobos on CG Hacks at cghacks.com that cover a range of different uses between nature, caustics, and so on. And that's pretty much how these areas are done. And as we start to move into other objects like this light post here, this is going to be one of the recreations. So we can see that we have this light post that is creating the circular shadow. It's quite simple to make and model. Again, it's most of the time it's going to be primitive objects that I'm using to do any of this, type of shadow work, because it doesn't all have to be blocked out or built out in 3D.
Yeah,
So
only the things that are visible. Just
yep.
remind you, all the great Western movies you may or may not have watched in the past, those beautiful towns in the desert, they were fake. They were facades. Sorry to you, just facades. Only the saloon, for some the jail, the saloon, and what else? Maybe, yeah, the jail and the saloon and the bank. Those were the three ones that they always rebuild.
Yeah. So we have, I think they said, we had somebody ask if this was Jonas's house. I don't know. I think his desk is right over here, somewhere.
Okay, I have a question for you on this particular image here.
Yeah.
Okay, so just viewing this, there seems to be one obvious source of light. Show us the non-obvious source of light.
Well, the non-obvious source of light is the other window.
Exactly, the other window. We didn't plan this. But
this one was not. I actually pulled this. I saw your when you were showing the footage. I just went and pulled a still out of the video because this is actually a really good one to discuss. And for a couple different reasons. Let me get rid of this line that I made here. So the obvious light source is going to be our window. And immediately you're going to think, hey, that's where it's at. And you put this in your scene and things just aren't going to add up.
Yep.
because there's quite a bit of diffusion here, first of all. And second of all, this is actually more indirect lighting than it is direct lighting, which is
Right.
why
Yep.
the shadow on the floor is going this way than it is, coming from the window. And so, looking at this, the cues that I'm going off of is this drawer. This is a very easy way to see exactly where the light's coming from, and it's coming down, in this direction, which tells me that there's a window right here somewhere behind the desk. And whatever this guy is here, this little doorknob, and
Yep.
this is weird, but this is how I like to go in and analyze things, right? This doorknob is going to tell you that there is a window sitting right there, kind of uh, where we thought, that was all coming from. And so this is also bouncing, in some of these areas, is bouncing off of, the cardboard, kind of indirect.
I have a question. I have a question.
Sure.
How can you, for a light source you can't see, how can you estimate if it's a big light source, a wide light source, or a narrow light source?
Well, it's all the shadows. So, yeah. So we are going to get to this in a minute.
Nice.
I don't know if you want to bring our cameras back because this is definitely a good conversation.
Let's let me do this, and here we are. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be
So,
looking at you.
shadows, hard shadows, soft shadows. It all has to do with the light scale in relation to your subject that you're lighting. So it this is something that I feel like can get very confusing, right? If you're using something like a spotlight, you're always going to have hard shadows. No, really, no matter what, as far as I'm concerned. I've never seen a soft spotlight. And so you're always going to have hard shadows because that light source is super small and generally far away from your subject with a powerful light that's casting down. So you're going to have harder shadows. And the thing about, say, using area lights in 3D, a lot of people will immediately go in and start to use the spread on the Redshift lights. I love that we have spread in the Redshift lights, but they won't always take into account, that having a gridded light source like I have here, is my key light is gridded. Having a gridded light source, fairly large in relation to the subject or me, is still creating very directional light, but it's just really keeping the light off of my background and off of certain areas in my office. And so, there is a difference between, having light going in a different direction, or say in a single direction, and having that light actually be hard or soft, as far as lighting is concerned. So larger soft boxes are going to create very harsh shadows if you back them off of your subject a ways and you start to crank up that light.
Well, the example, I would say that I like to maximize certain examples to show how true that is. The sun is fairly big,
Yeah.
but it's far away. For I'm glad to say it's not very close. And yet, even though it's massive in size, it produces very sharp shadows. I think the sun only occupies 5 degrees of the sky, or something like that, 2.5 degrees, something like that. So it's not the scale per se, as Dustin said, it's a scale and the distance ratio. So how much of your background does the light source occupy? That is going to, let's say, imagine my camera frame. If you have a very small light source, it's going to produce shadows which are very sharp. If you have a bigger light source, it's going to produce shadows that are much softer. And this little one could be a 3-mile light that's very far away, or it can be a very small light that's very close up. So it's that ratio. How big is the light in in your photo, and that will define how sharp your shadows are going to be.
Yeah, and this is also why it's super important to work, at least when possible, in as close to real world scale as you can, um, because then you can start to take into account a lot of, photographic reference and understanding, general light modifiers and their sizes and how those things will impact your scene. If you're talking a scene that's, maybe a room that in 3D is 10 miles, wide, it's going to be off when you start to throw lights in there, and the average light size is maybe 48 inches. So things can get weird. Think about it in real life as much as possible, and just know that the difference between soft and hard shadows is the scale of your light in relation to your subject that you're lighting.
Oh,
So
and one thing, when we say scale of the light, the the final shadow doesn't really care if the light is coming from one source or many sources. So if you have a lot of point lights set next to each other in a grid, that
yep,
will produce a shadow that's equivalent to an area light. So you need to understand these not in, oh, it's a single object. No, no.
right,
How or from how a wide area the light is coming from. Whether it's, I mean, take your TV screen. Your TV screen is not one light. Your monitor is not one light. Your monitor is an array of about 1.5 million pixels. So it's 1.5 million lights spread over a square panel, and yet it functions as one area light. So think of that in terms of the spread. What else do you have for us, Dustin? I'm going to share your
uh,
screen. You have
yeah.
anything appropriate there? Yeah,
So
good.
I think we have one left.
Mhm.
And I did see a comment about the door here. I believe that the door lighting that's happening in this area here is actually still just from the window. Um, so it's kind of interesting. You can sort of see here that it looks like the door is obviously, it's open. Man, that poor house. Um,
Can you show that knob again? Because that is the most telling detail from this photo that indicates, you can see the behind the camera, it's relatively dark. There's only one
right.
source of light, and that demystifies the whole thing. That's why the series is called Demystifying. So that
Yep.
demystifies, exactly as Dustin said, that the predominant light source is coming from the left.
Yeah, and there are other cues. So looking at the chair itself, right? We can see that we have, the highlights on the chair here are telling us that there's quite a bright light source. Even the shadows, from the fabric, we can see it. There's quite a bright light source that's coming off here from the camera left. And yeah, so looking at these, at these different cues, if you're compositing into this shot, it's just knowing how to read the shadows of the original shot. So whether it's hard shadows, whether it's soft shadows, and finding a good balance in between. So the last one is a shot that I took a few years ago in my garage. And so there are a lot of times where I'm compositing people into set extensions, matte paintings, just general photo composites, if you will. And, I have to look at various bits of lighting and understand what I need to light for once I get to the 3D side. And so, how I normally break this down is no different than what we've just done, is looking at the obvious sources first, right? I have a light coming from here, camera right, that's creating the nice rim light and the separation on the edge of our subject. And then I have a light that is tinted or gelled that is coming from a softbox that is quite a ways up here and off camera left. So a lot of times this is where people would stop, but there is also a third light source that's an indirect light source that's creating these highlights. And so the interesting part about that is that, there, this is something like I could easily just paint in Photoshop, but in a pinch, it's going to be a lot easier to do this in 3D and just quickly place a light, or in this case would be a bounce card or reflector that's bouncing our rim light here onto the front of our subject, and it's also creating kind of a nice fill. And so if we look at the behind the scenes, we'll see that we have our softbox. Oh, where we go? We'll just kind of move that up. Oh, that's kind of weird how the key light lines up pretty well. All right, so we have the softbox here that's providing the key light on our subject. We have the strip box that's creating the rim light. And then we can also see this reflector here right next to me that's creating the nice bit of fill light and that other highlight that we were getting right towards the front of our armor. And so when we're looking at these things, it's really important to not only gauge just the direct light sources, but also the indirect light sources and the shadows that they provide, because you can learn a lot from them and make your composites look a lot more realistic. When it comes to the color, temperature, and lighting, I really got lucky with this shot in particular, because what you can do is try to find something as neutral gray as possible. In this case, we have the armor. And what I can do is simply sample some of the brightest parts. So we'll zoom in here. Maybe I'd sample from this area here for, the kind of cyan gel that I had on. And then we can find some of these other areas in the armor, like maybe right here for that warm color, and use that to place the color right inside of our Redshift lights or your 3D lights. And you're going to get very close. And then the rest from there is pretty much post-production and making everything pop.
I want to make a comment.
Sure.
In response, in agreement with Sandro's comment. So Sandro says, anyways, with better demand from our cameramen to start the scene with shading and chrome balls and a color checker panel, capturing them before start action. Actually, that's absolutely spot on.
Yes.
And actually, one of our episodes, one of the
you can
episodes,
bring our there we go.
Yeah, one of the episodes we're going to do about camera tracking. Actually, we're not going to show again. I mean, we may show some things on how to do camera tracking, right, in Cinema 4D, but there are tutorials out there. It's free on University. There are tons of tutorials if you want to learn how to use a tracker. That episode is going to tell you, first of all, which scenes cannot be tracked. And the reason for that is exactly what Sandro is saying, that the best way to track a scene is to shoot a scene for the purpose of tracking. That is the significance of the VFX supervisor. And you need to become, or you need to hire, or you need to convince the people you work with. Although, digression, I know that most of you receive footage that's already prepared, and there's nothing you can do. The client will not reshoot and all that. But as much influence as you have, put it towards that. Number one influence, put it towards getting more money for your jobs. And number two, make sure that you can supervise or provide some information as to either what to do to get a shot that's better to track, or what to avoid.
Right.
And as long as you have input in the process, the earlier you can set, it doesn't mean that the director or the director of photography has to change what they are trying to do. It may be just to take a little stick and put it in the middle of the scene and then just go and remove it, because that little stick with that little marker on top of it will make a huge difference. We're going to talk about all these things, but I have to emphasize what Sandro says. In order to track successfully, you have to shoot to track. There are certain things that you need to avoid and certain things you need to proactively do to make sure that your scene can be tracked. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the scene that you're shooting. It's just use the same camera and the same lens to do a survey track on the side of the set just to get some numbers. Get some measurements, another thing you can do. Anyway, we're going to get into that.
I mean, in a reference is at the end of the day, we're just talking reference, right?
Yep.
Any bit of reference that you can give yourself and any project is always going to be beneficial. For instance, like when I'm shooting photography and I'm traveling to Comic Cons and I'm setting up and doing these things, I have got it down to, I don't want to say a science, but I generally know at this point my lighting setup because I built it to be fixed. I know where things are going to be. It makes my life a lot easier once I get to post, because it's almost the same every time. I'm just turning one light off, one light on, doing different things, maybe throwing a gel in there. But the positioning of the lights, the hard or soft nature of the lights is always the same. So, what I usually do if I'm on set, I use the panoramic mode on my phone. And, if I'm like shooting on location, I will just take my phone out and just zip a quick panoramic shot. And I know exactly where my subject is, where the light sources are. It doesn't always have to be, something like a chrome ball and a color checker for especially stills. When you're getting into like live action and things like that, 100%, if you have it available, all the reference you can get is going to save your life later. And so, yeah, it's, just making use of the tools that you have on you every day, like a phone.
Well, the eyeballing technique is nothing more than post reference, basically. When you assess the height of 2 stories of a building, it's the same as you being there and using a tape measure to
Yep.
measure where that point is, but you're measuring your camera. So the eyeballing is closer to what you would do on set. But if you can do it on set, you capture things in their real dimensions, in their real brightnesses, and as much data as you can capture for everything, light position, camera elevation, and all that. And by the way, something that I do mention in my tracking tutorial, just because it needs to be said, the named focal length of a lens is not exactly the optical focal length of your lens, because some of these lenses are created. Oh, thank you. Don't assume it's exactly the same. It could be a couple of millimeters off, and that could be the difference that's creating this problem, because the final focal length has to do with many things: how far the backplate is from the lens. These are supposed to be standard, but the best way to get the number, it doesn't matter if it's a real focal length, your image, for whatever reason, when we talk about the oh my god, this undistorting before tracking, when you undistort, you are changing the characteristics of your lens. So what you are interested in is not what the real lens was. Nobody cares about that. It's the video you are seeing. How is that going to be interpreted by the tracking software, and how you're going to render something to fit to that? The number itself is just a utility you would use. If someone could give you the absolute perfect numbers, okay, but in most cases there are parameters that make what you see in the video slightly different from what the tracker or your renderer is going to do. So the best way is, number one, get your references for lights, for positions, for all that. Make sure your scene is trackable. And I'm digressing now. We're going to talk about these in the other episodes. Do you have anything else for us? We're only about 24 minutes overrun.
Yeah, I mean, we're only 24 minutes. I feel like we could get into a whole tracking project if you wanted to.
This series cannot be comprehensive. We can be going on and on with this series for a whole year. What we'd like to do is just focus on those things that will help you move forward faster and generate specific questions after you've watched all the tutorials, please. And ask questions for specific scenes. And on the tracking tutorial, I'm going to show you a very specific case of a scene that was given to me, and I'm going to explain why half of it is not trackable. And that's going to be the epitome, because the next time you find yourself having footage like that, you need to make a decision. Instead of wasting 10 hours trying to track it and failing, knowing that this is not trackable, either then you just totally eyeball it, you track the portion you can, and then you merge it with the eyeballing person, the portion, sorry, person, the portion. The eyeballing person is you and I. And so these are, for me, the important things. Saving time. The more you struggle to do things that cannot be done in the way most of us expect to do them, the more time you'll have to either investigate other methods, fake it using nice little trickery and intuition and eyeballing, or reshooting it, because you can save a lot of time if the footage is yours and you can reshoot with new information in mind.
So the moral of the story, generally, is if it looks right, it is right, and you can save a lot of time by failing as often as possible to get the experience to know how to troubleshoot and evaluate the difference.
Exactly.
So, yeah, fail a lot. I fail all the time. So you
As I
learn
say,
something every time.
well, I'm infallible, but infallibility is not a point, is not a moment, is not a state. Infallibility is a trajectory. The more you fail, and you change and you learn from your mistakes, the more you approach that singularity of infallibility. I'm very close, but not there yet. So, but that is the point of all this, is to save time, save your life from wasting time, not being able to do things that you can't do in a particular way. And for me, being now 57 years old in a few days, time has become much more valuable than when I was in my 20s running around with my motorcycle like crazy in Greece, right? In flip-flops and stuff. And I can't say more about that because they could receive a fine. But the idea being that your time is the most valuable asset you have. It's the only currency you'll never get back. So the point of these webinars is to teach you what to avoid and those shortcuts that will get you towards the correct solutions. And everything is fake. Everything is pixels. You can literally, without any software, just paint dots, colored dots, and recreate every single masterpiece you've seen in the movies. It's going to take you a moment, but that's all we do. It's a grid of pixels, right? So at the end of the day, in theory, you can track something just by changing the colors of the pixels and spend a million years doing that. That's not the objective, spending your whole life just colorizing pixels. You have to have time to enjoy all the other nice things and enjoy the process, right? When it becomes a struggle, I personally do not like. One of the reasons I help people that ask me is that I hate that feeling. I've been in that position one too many times, of struggling to do something that seemed easy to begin with, or believing in a promise that this is going to work this way and it doesn't. So we're trying to filter out all that stuff that makes your lives harder and give you more time to yourselves to create beautiful artwork using our software, by the way. Shameless plug. Gandhi bio. Oh, that's funny.
Oh,
So,
man.
if you do you have any other things you want to show us? Dustin is going to be with us on all the shows, whether presenting or just hanging out with us, because we always like Dustin's company.
Yeah, I will be here. The Black Falcon is not leaving this month. That's hilarious. I might actually have to do something with that. We'll see. I mean, maybe I'll have a T-shirt later on this month. Who knows?
Nice.
My own superhero.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do something. I don't know. But yeah, I don't really have anything else to show. I feel like a lot of this stuff, we talk about a lot of the same concepts, at the core. We talk about a lot of the same concepts, which is, learning how to learn from your mistakes, and making a lot of mistakes, because there's a lot of times that we spend too much time thinking about what a solution is going to be instead of just getting our knuckles dirty and figuring it out. Workflows they're never the same. Like Thanassis said, you get projects where you think it's going to be easy. I have had them, so many of them. I remember one of my first industry projects was in Blender, coming from Maya and Cinema 4D at that point. And I'm like, you're telling me all I have to do is take this semi truck, and it was a logo reveal for a freight company or something, and I just had to reveal a logo with a semi truck driving. It was not. I thought it would be easy,
Never.
and so there I was learning a lot of new things in Blender, much prior versions of Blender than what we have today. And I learned a lot from that. I learned that I never want to do a semi truck logo reveal again, but I've also learned quite a bit about say Blender as a 3D package. I learned about different types of lighting and how to transition lighting through shadows and different stuff, and it's pretty cool. So yeah, it's
Okay, I'm
really
gonna cut you
recommend.
off now. Where do we find you, Dustin? Where is your work? Where can people see your stuff and learn from you?
Well, if you have a question at night, you'll see a shining black falcon logo in the sky. So that's
Ah,
where I'll be.
ah.
But seriously, I Dustin Valkema pretty much on all social platforms. So YouTube, it's at Dustin Valkema, and Facebook at Dustin Valkema, and
If you go to
Instagram
the
at
top of
Dustin. That's
the
me.
chat, I pasted everything there. So go
Yo,
to the top of the chat and check things
yeah.
out,
And
and the
so
YouTube channel and all that.
yeah, and so the second place is CG Hacks. It's my
Yeah.
company with a cool, group of
Because it's all
guys
a
that
hack. It's all a
yeah,
hack.
it's
It's
all
all
a hack.
fake. It's
It's
all
all fake.
fake.
Nothing is real, man. Nothing
Yeah.
is real anymore.
The Marvel
But yeah,
universe doesn't exist.
yeah.
Sorry.
And so yeah, cghacks.com. You can check us out there, and CG Hacks across social. Um yeah, so we
Okay,
have
you can find me,
a lot of fun.
Noseman GR on Twitter. DM me with questions. Simplify your scenes. Don't send me third-party plugins and all that. Only standard cinema.
I was gonna say send him all the things. He
No,
loves it.
yeah, return to sender. I'm gonna add more rubbish, make a huge zip, and send it back. So yeah, I think yeah, I'm gonna write my Twitter. So it's at NosemanGR. Boom. I hope I didn't misspell it. No,
All
that's
three
me.
of the Maxons. Look at the red
Yeah.
bull. You got red giant.
Yeah.
They're both Maxons.
So yeah, there are
Love
no
it.
more questions. I hope you enjoyed this. And again, it's not to provide all the answers, but it's these shows are um, I given to you are made because we want to seed the ground, and your questions is what generates education. All right, we don't know each of our users' struggles and what they're dealing with, and we do the best we can. Training at maxon.net for any training related issues or any scenes you want to send. Our tech support is doing a great job. Anything they can't handle, they send it to us. Duh. Um, but there's always some sort of solution. If we're not replying, we either didn't get the message or you didn't send it. So a follow up. And yeah, I think we are done for today. We'll see you next week with some things happening in between. Go to the events page. Let me see if I have to go through a protocol here. I'm going to share my stream. I'm going to put up my right. Let me just bring up. I've lost my browser pages. I'm not good at this. I need someone. There we go. Okay, let's do the closing sequence. Just throw some stuff at you. Boom, add to stream. There we go. So maxon.net, English events or news events, and you get all the events that are going on here. Maxon certification. You will find all the information about becoming a certified pro user and a certified trainer. If you have any questions, training and Maxon at maxon.net. The design and animation tour with all these beautiful people like EJ. Oh, it's so funny. Look how EJ looks here. Chris Schmidt, pretty accurate, and Jonathan Wimbush, beautiful as always, and many other amazing, talented artists and trainers. So go to the Maxon merch store and put in that beautiful code you will find in the chat and get one of your amazing little presents here, just as a token of appreciation for you watching us, as if education and entertainment, which is the main reason I'm doing that, is not enough. You get free merch. So let me remove this. I probably had something else to say, but I forgot about it.
I don't know. I feel like we're really bad at like just ending a stream. It's like you hang up, no, you hang up, and we'll just sit here. Like we could just talk. We could
Why
go
you?
on.
Why is everyone still here? I mean, okay, we're going to close it right here. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay in touch, and we'll see you very soon on the same screen, on the same subject, but nice and tasty. Bye.
Awesome. Bye, everyone. See you next week.